Thumbs up.
Okay, thank you.
That's live now, Corey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the new normal, the regular scheduled meeting, Taber Town Council for March the 23rd, 2020. We do first have a subdivision authority meeting to take care of, so I will call that meeting to order and ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Garner?
Mr. Mayor, I can make that motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion on the table. All in favor? On the, all right, thank you. Carried unanimously. All right, on to agenda item number 3, the council minutes of February 24th, 2020. Mr. Orwa.
So before you are the minutes of regular meeting of Subdivision Authority from February the 24th for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Stravas.
Your Worship, move that Council adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of the Subdivision Authority held on February 24th, 2020 as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item number 4, item 4.1, subdivision TT 20-0-002. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, I'll call upon Ms. Monks to address this with Council, please.
Thank you, Ms. Monks.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. This subdivision application is, wrong one. At the January 13th, 2020 regular meeting of Council, Resolution 24-2020 was passed, directing administration to sell 1.47 acres of land in the Eureka Industrial Park at the appraised value. This subdivision application will enable the registration of a plan that creates a 1.47 acre lot in order to proceed with that sales agreement. The subdivision application has been advertised in the Taber Times February 12th and 19th and was also circulated to internal and external stakeholders and to adjacent properties within a 100-meter radius. At the March 16th, 2020 Municipal Planning Commission meeting, MPC recommended that the Subdivision Authority approve the application with the conditions identified in your agenda package. If the Subdivision Authority approves the application, an appeal period will be adhered to, and then endorsement of the plan will be submitted to land titles. Once the lot is registered, the sale can be completed and a development permit process can begin.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Subdivision Authority approve subdivision application TT 20-0-002, part of Lot 10, Block 2, Plan 071-2404, within the Southeast Quarter section of Section 8, Township 10, Range 4, west of the 4th Meridian, civilly described as 6920 64th Street, with the following conditions as noted 1 through 4.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. All right, on to item 4.2, subdivision TT 20-0-003. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, Ms. Monks can proceed, please.
Thank you. So this subdivision application is essentially a lot line adjustment for this applicant. Currently, there is one access to lots 11 to 13, and it is located on lot 12. The applicant would like the access to remain in place, but is also intending to develop the remainder of the lot for a different use. By subdividing a portion of lot 12 and consolidating it with lot 11, this provides access and servicing to lot 11. The applicant will then sell lots 12 and 13, and depending on how that sale proceeds, will service and provide access to those lots once the best location for that is determined. At this time, the applicant will either perform the servicing and access construction or into a deferred servicing agreement for that work and register it on the new title. That way, when a development permit is received, administration can work with the applicant to determine how the work will be completed. At the March 16th, 2020 Municipal Planning Commission meeting, MPC recommended that the subdivision authority approve the application with the conditions identified in your agenda package. If the subdivision authority approves the application, an appeal period will be adhered to, and then endorsement of the plan will be submitted to land titles to create the new lots.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Strauss?
Yes, Your Worship, make the motion that the subdivision authority approve subdivision application TT 20-0-003, part of lots 11, 12, Block 2, Plan 771-1362 within the southeast quarter section of the 5 Township Road 10, Range 16, west of the 4th Meridian, civically described as 5814 57A Street, with the following conditions 1 through 9.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monks. Also, just ask for a motion to close the meeting, please.
Move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I will call the regular scheduled Taber Town Council meeting to order and ask for the adoption of the agenda as presented, please. Councillor Garner?
Make that motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion on the table. All in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item number 3.1, adoption of the minutes. Minutes of regular meeting of council March 9th, 2020. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, His Worship, again, before you are the minutes of regular meeting of council from March 9th for your consideration.
Right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Bruin, you'd like to make that motion?
Yes, I can make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
All right, if you would.
I'm sorry, it's not on my screen yet.
Just adopted the minutes of the regular council meeting March 9th, 2020.
Yes, I would like to make that motion.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table.
The reg-
Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
In favor.
Business arising from the minutes. There are none. Bylaws. There are none. Item number 6.1, raw water supply review report. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, I can see Mr. Shia is already seated, and I think he'll pick it from there, and I think he has some other guests that might be joining us via the phone. So proceed, Mr. Shia.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Orwa. So when we looked at what's a good, reliable water source for the town of Taber for its residents and businesses, we actually did quite comprehensive study of all the water sources around here. What you don't see is actually one we did independently, which is an underground water. Is there an aquifer in the Taber area? Well, basically it came out, no, there is none. There's a high water table, but not enough for the whole community. So from this, we went to a raw water report, and Mr. Klessinger, are you on the line?
I'm here, Gary.
Yep. Okay, please proceed with your report.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you to Mr. Mayor and to Council for inviting me in to give a bit of a presentation here on the study that we did. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so as Gary mentioned, we were brought in to take a look at some of the raw water supply options available to the town. So, Gary, if you're on the presentation outline line.
Yeah, I'm on there. We're starting right there.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go through a bit of an outline of the presentation here this afternoon. I'll try to keep it to about 10-15 minutes. I hope that's okay with everyone. But essentially, I'll give a brief project description, scope of work, touch on some of the work that has been previously done, looking at the existing raw water infrastructure, determining what the demands are on your raw water supply, and looking at future projections to sort of establish what is the design criteria to look at a future supply source or enhancing your existing source. And then addressing a couple of different alternatives that we reviewed in pretty good detail, talking about cost estimates, and finally the recommendations. Next slide. So the brief project description and the project scope. So we were brought in to look at water infrastructure, obviously focusing on the town of Taber, but also looking at Barnwell and the MD of Tabor, realizing that there are some interconnections there on the raw water side with those other municipalities. The scope of the project, as I mentioned, determining the raw water demands, looking at the existing infrastructure, looking high level at water quality and capacity of existing sources, and looking at the viability of alternate sources was also touched on, and cost estimates, and fully developing a couple of detailed alternatives, and summarizing the work in a report or technical memorandum. Next slide. The previous work that had been done, so the town has undergone a number of studies over the last, say 10 years, looking at the raw water supply. MPE was brought in 2017 to do a high-level review of the infrastructure on the raw water supply side. The key findings of that review there are listed on that slide, but they look basically at what your raw water demands are and what your system is capable of delivering to the water plant site. I think the key one to look at there is the hydraulic capacity of the supply line, which is at 11 MLD, or 11 million liters per day. And then the diversion rate from the Chin Reservoir, technically by license, is capped at 7.9 million liters per day. So those numbers are just important numbers to keep in mind as we go forward. Next slide. Just touching briefly on your existing raw water infrastructure. So the Chin pumping station has an intake and a pump station located at Chin Reservoir. There is a 14-inch or 350 millimeter PVC pressurized raw water supply line from Chin, lifting it up the hill, essentially to the Barnwell Reservoir junction. From that point on, it effectively transitions to a gravity feed through the 400 millimeter and 525 millimeter AC and concrete pipeline portion. That is we'll call that the Chin supply system. There's also a gravity intake off of the TID canal located about 2 or 3 kilometers south of the water plant, south of town. And that is the primary source of supply during the irrigation season. So from, say, mid-April through end of September, that is the primary source of supply. And both of those supply systems work to maintain levels in the raw water storage reservoirs, which are located adjacent to your water plant. So there's 500,000 cubic meters of storage right at the water plant site. Next slide. There's just a couple of photos showing you an outside shot of the Chin pump station and the TID intake building, control building, just south of town. Next slide. Just an overview shot from Google Earth looking at the water plant site. You can see the 2 large raw water storage reservoirs located immediately adjacent to the water treatment plant. So both the TID supply and the Chin supply act to maintain water level in these 2 reservoirs, and then your water plant draws in off the 2 reservoirs. And again, there's about 500,000 cubic meters of storage in those 2 cells combined. Next slide. This is just a larger overview of the proximity of the water plant to the other, I guess, key locations here. So there's the Barnwell Reservoir, which is abandoned. That was a supply source that was utilized up until about the year 2000. It's no longer used. The Chin supply line comes right adjacent to that on its way up from Chin, and that's about where it transitions to gravity feed to feed town. Barnwell is also shown there encircled because they receive water off of the Chin supply line through a dedicated pumping system. That when you are pumping from Chin, Barnwell has the ability to draw off of the pipeline to fill their reservoir as well during the quote-unquote non-irrigation season. Next slide. This is just more of an overview figure showing the proximity of the Chin pump station. There's that 14-inch pipeline you can see coming up from Chin to the Barnwell Reservoir junction where it transitions to gravity. So that's an overall kind of schematic of your system. Next slide. So this table then on the raw water demands and future projections slide, this, I guess the key number out of here, I probably should have circled it, but if you look at the bottom line of the table, it says non-irrigation season raw water demand. So that is based on your historical water consumption. That is the raw water supply requirement that the town will see we use the year 2039 of roughly 1.5 million cubic meters of raw water is needed during that period when you can't draw water out of the TID canal. So effectively, your main supply source, the Chin pump station, needs to, coupled with the storage you have, the buffer of storage you have at the water plant site, needs to be able to provide 1.5 million cubic meters. So if you subtract the approximately 500,000 cubic meters of storage, that's where we came up with that 1 million cubic meter number of what this alternate supply system would need to be able to provide to the town. Next slide. So I mentioned there are two main alternatives that we reviewed in addition to the high-level look at the alternate sources. But we looked at upgrading the Chin pump station as alternative number one in no particular order. And alternative number two was rehabilitating the Barnwell Reservoir to provide that additional storage. And I mentioned the additional alternatives. We looked at alternate sources, both surface water, groundwater, to just determine if there was any viable source outside of Chin to provide water during that non-irrigation season. And those were all quickly dismissed for one reason or another, really being unable to meet the list of requirements that we had for that alternate source. Next slide. I'll dive into a bit more detail then on the Chin pump station upgrade. So what would be proposed under this upgrade would be the construction of a new pumping station adjacent to the existing pump station. And really the critical difference between what we would be proposing as the new station versus the existing is on the intake side. So the existing pump station has about a 60-meter long intake pipeline that extends out into Chin Reservoir, and it's just gravity fed through that intake line into a concrete pump well where your pumps sit on shore. And the issue with that is water levels in Chin. And there's a good slide, actually the next slide, Gary, shows the historical water levels in Chin from we're really back since 1994. And you can see that the dashed black line across that graph, that's the minimum water level that's required in Chin Reservoir for you to be able to operate your existing pumping station. So it does drop during the summer months, which makes sense because it's being utilized by irrigation districts, and you're not reliant upon it during that time period. So that's less of a concern. You can see the dip in all those curves. What is a concern, though, is when we come out of the irrigation season, and I've highlighted the year 2017, which is an orange line. You can see where that comes out of the irrigation season, basically right at that minimum intake elevation. So that's showing us that there has been years in recent years where water level in Chin has not been significant enough for you to guarantee operation of the Chin pumping station. So that's where the idea comes to look at running the intake line further out into Chin to an area where Chin is deeper, and that's shown best on the next slide, Gary. So Alberta Environment has some bathymetric survey data available for the Chin Reservoir, and that's what's shown here on this figure graphically. You can see I've highlighted where the existing pump station site is, and then the darker blue on the figure represents deeper water. You can see where your pump station is, and if you were to draw the existing intake line out, you'd still be in the red or orange, which would indicate very shallow water. What our proposal is for alternative one is to, instead of a 60-meter intake that you currently have, we'd be looking at like a 400-meter intake, which would take the intake out to an elevation which would be below the outlet elevation for Chin Reservoir. So effectively there would always be water above that level, above that intake level. This system, if you switch to the next slide, Gary, would also include submersible pumps. That's the other big change from your existing system, which has vertical turbine pumps, which sit in a pump well. This would take the physical pump and put it out in the intake, out in Chin pump station, so there would always be water elevation above the pump itself. So that's really the key design criteria. I've shown some photos from a very similar installation that we've done. We did this for Cowley, Alberta. This is in the Oldman Reservoir. So this is a design that's tried and true, and one that we've just recently done a couple of years ago now. It's been commissioned, and it's something that we feel would work very well for this application for Tabor. The next slide, Gary, that just shows a section drawing. So effectively, that pump station building. Pardon me. All right, the pump station building would sit on shore, and the pump itself would sit in the intake line out 400 meters into the reservoir. So the building itself would just house the electrical controls, the valving, flow meter, but the pump itself would be out in the water. With the ability to pull it, you can see the line that kind of extends off the page to the left. The idea is you could physically pull the pump and the drop pipe out of the line from the river, or sorry, from the reservoir, from the shore here. And again, this is the design that was implemented in Cowley. So that's a quick overview of that alternative. The second alternative that we dove into was the Barnwell Reservoir rehabilitation. So that is the abandoned reservoir that we talked about initially when we saw the overview figure. It was last utilized by the town in year 2000. Pardon me, right around that time. What we'd be looking at doing to get that 1 million cubic meters of storage, there would be an expansion requirement to that reservoir. Within the existing footprint, we could get approximately 800,000 cubic meters of storage, which wouldn't suffice. So there would be a need for some fairly significant earthworks required to expand that cell. There would be, I mentioned the increased berm height. There'd be some baffling that we would add, or basically a wall down the center of the reservoir to improve the flow path through the reservoir so we could have some control on water quality. There'd be new inlet and outlet control structures. There still would be a need to pump it out of that reservoir, which is a key thing to keep in mind. It doesn't flow by gravity right from that location. It would need to pump a fairly short distance to get to the gravity portion of the raw water pipeline. So there would still be a need to pump even from there. And then we looked at adding aeration to that reservoir to improve water quality. Next slide, Gary. One thing with that alternative is it would essentially be online all the time, even though you wouldn't need to draw water from it during the summer months. But it would act as sort of the inlet off of the St. Mary's Canal for the TID. So there'd be constant flow through it during the summer months, which would again help water quality wise when you look to start utilizing it at the end of the irrigation season. So there would be a constant throughput through it all summer. The aeration system would be on, so there'd be good water quality. TID would see a benefit from this from a water quality perspective, and Gary and I have had some meetings with them initially when we were doing the study. That's about it from that slide. Next slide. Gary,
we should point out that
overview.
Andrew, just a minute. We should point out that TID was actually in favor. If this went ahead, they would put some money into those structures. What amount they wouldn't guarantee at this time, but they said they would contribute to it. Go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
No problem. The next figure there shows an overview figure of the proposed option. So you can see adding that baffle, which is the kind of the structure down the middle of the reservoir, kind of creates the two zones in the reservoir. So there's some sedimentation happening in that first cell. Then we look at adding aeration to the second cell, if you want to call it that. And that's where our pump intake would be. We'd be pulling that water and pumping it to Tabor. That gives a kind of a synopsis of that option. I think where that option, and you'll see on the next slide where we get into costs, but where we really lost it is just in looking to expand that reservoir to get that 1 million cubic meter volume that we need. The cost just increased exponentially. If we could have kept it to within that existing footprint, and it provides about 800,000 cubic meters of storage. then the costs are much more comparable to the new intake and pump station at Chin, but it doesn't effectively get you that volume that you need during that non-irrigation season, as we saw on the table earlier in the presentation. Next slide then, Gary, is the cost. So these are estimated costs, obviously. Alternative 1 is the new intake and pump station at Chin at about $3.8 million. Alternative 2A, so that is all those upgrades at the Barnwell Reservoir without increasing the storage volume, near about $4.3 million. And then alternative 2B, as I mentioned, the costs increase exponentially, and that is purely a result of needing the additional clay material for constructing the higher berm height. So we increased to $13.8 million, and that is, again, mostly related to the need to haul in good material to build the berms. Next slide. So with those costs, I broke those costs out a little further to show that there would be a small Barnwell cost share, just based on the percentage of overall volume. So Tabor would utilize approximately 93% of that volume, and Barnwell about 7%. So I just used those rough numbers to come up with a cost share. So, I mean, obviously it is Tabor, it's the lion's share to Tabor, but Barnwell conceivably should have some skin in the game, as they are reliant upon that Chin supply for their source of supply during the non-irrigation season. Next slide, Gary. This one looked at potential funding sources. AMWWP, so through Alberta Transportation, would probably be the most readily available, I guess. And that's a grant calculation based on your population. So that was 36.8% roughly. We looked at a few other sources, ACRP, CWWF. Those are no longer open to new applications. As well, the federal ICIP program, that was just rolled out provincially. And if you look at the last provincial budget, there's only about 70 million of the 1.25 billion that Alberta has over 10 years, which has not been allocated. So it's very unlikely that we'll see another intake coming under the ICIP program as it's currently constituted. Now, obviously, with the current situation in the province and in the country and the world, for that matter, all bets are off, and we're not sure how these new economic stimulus packages are going to look. But that's just how the funding looks kind of right now. One program to look at is the ACP program, Alberta Community Partnership. So because this is technically a regional project, you would check the right boxes there to look at, up to $200,000 through an ACP grant, which could be used for some design work potentially. So that's something to keep in mind, is there should be a new intake on the ACP program opening fairly soon, and that might be something to consider going forward. Next slide, I think, is just the recommendations. So ultimately, our recommendation was to look at the new intake and pump station at Chin Reservoir, feeling that provided the most viable solution going forward. And then the rest just talk about preparing funding applications based on that recommendation, based on the study, and then proceeding with detailed design once funding is in place. That's my quick run through that report. I'd certainly welcome any questions or comments at this time.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shearer or Mr. Andrew, did you explore the possibility of constructing a new reservoir adjacent to the water treatment plant at all?
Well, it would have to be twice the size we have currently. So the cost to get that clay would be almost the same as adding to Barnwell Reservoir. Is that correct, Andrew? Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct, yeah. Both the land, you're right, like you'd be doubling the land area that you currently have for raw water storage. Then you have
actually we'd be tripling the land.
And just, yeah, that's right. And then, yeah, there's water quality issues potentially with that, as well as obviously just finding that material, which was the problem with the Barnwell Reservoir option as we dove into that a little bit further.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councilor Stravas.
Yes, I have a number of questions here. The first question here, Mr. Chair, a couple of years ago, I can remember you extended that pipeline out further for the pump station, or you made comment to that you had to do that 1 year.
Yeah, we bought a mobile pump. We didn't extend the pipeline. We bought a mobile pump, moved it out, and then bought some irrigation pipe and moved it and just pumped it into the pump house so we could pump up.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that clarification. My next question here, Andrew, I don't see any comments about whether you did any test holes. What's underneath that Barnwell Reservoir Basin? Do you know what kind of supports are underneath there?
There was a geotechnical investigation that was done. We had a copy of that report. That's what sort of guided our cost estimating when looking at availability of material and how we could construct the larger or the expansion of the reservoir, I should say. So there is a geotech investigation that was done.
What does that investigation say about what is underneath that basin there? Just in a nutshell, is there any clay down there? Is it sand? Is it
I don't know offhand. What I do know is that it wasn't suitable for constructing. It wasn't a good suitable clay supply source, which is why we looked at the need to likely truck in material. So that's obviously that exponentially increases the cost of that construction.
So when we looked at Barnwell Reservoir, there is clay underneath there, and TID did that geotechnical study because they want to use it for basically a sedimentation area. But when they looked at it, that clay was compromised and the alkali was actually oozing up into the area. That was part of the issue.
Okay, so then if you did, rather than build the berm up there, if you dug that down further and utilize some of that material, obviously you'd have to use on the backside for grading, but there must be some material there that you could utilize to move around and put some around the berm. And then did you investigate what it would cost to put a liner in that reservoir?
We did look at a liner. A liner is included in that cost estimate, so that would be a lined reservoir.
Okay, so you could take that down rather than what I'm getting at is the trucking cost to bring clay in would be quite substantial. So rather than haul that in, dig it down and put a liner in there, build the berm up with a little bit of that there, and put the liner in rather than just building the berm up, is taking it down deeper.
We did look at that. That was one of the options that was explored. There were some complications with that, and just to get the volume that we need, so obviously as the slopes increase, it was going to have to be quite deep. So there were some complications with that in looking at that option, but that was looked at by our civil guys.
Because there was a conversation at one point stocking it with fish and making it a pond. Where there could be some government dollars for that. But I wonder, Mr. Scheer, if you couldn't make that geotechnical report available to council so that we could take a look and analyze that?
Yes, we could. Yes.
Thank you. Just another comment. Years ago, I expanded a restaurant Underwood McClellan, I think, was UMA Boa back then, and they showed me a picture of an underground stream that ran underneath Tabor through the golf course and around. So is that gone? Because you made mention that there is no natural aquifer there anymore, but there was back in the early 90s when I added an addition onto my business.
So when we looked at the groundwater, we looked at all the well sites in the area and what their volumes were coming up. And there was not near enough for municipal use, that's for sure. Basically, it's just for each house or farm location. the big stream, we couldn't find any documentation that said you have this volume, nor was that volume ever guaranteed.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, Gary, I think further to the groundwater discussion, and this is in our report, but it makes sense to look at your treatment system as well. Your treatment plant is obviously a major asset to the town, and you've invested a lot of money into it. It's specifically for surface water treatment. Now, if you're looking at groundwater, you really have to look at the water quality aspects, because there can be very different water quality characteristics from a groundwater supply source to the surface water sources that you're currently treating. And that could be very challenging potentially for your water plant, and could require some significant upgrades to ensure that you still produce the high quality water that you do now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Brewer.
I just add something there. Go down, deeper you go down in this storage, the higher you have to pump it out. And I think that will be just soaked with water. So the cost of deepening that hole would probably be as much as hauling in clay. So that's just my bit on that.
Okay.
Well, Your Worship, sorry, just one. Can I make one more comment just before you go on? The fact is the unknown factor here is the fact that we don't know what's going to happen as far as water storage and snow intakes from the mountains. So, I mean, I know you made a reference to the fact is that pump would always be below the level of the base there, but there still could be an issue somewhere down the long line in drought conditions that could reduce the amount of water that is brought into that there down the line. So I would think an additional storage capacity for the town would be the most beneficial option on a go-forward basis.
Mr. Armfeld, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I can speak to the last comment from Councillor Stravis directly. If there is a low water amount in Chin, if we expand the reservoir near Barnwell, that will very likely be empty because there will be nothing flowing through the irrigation districts. So the only way to get water will be to reach out and grab whatever's left in Chin in an extreme drought year, because there won't be suitable supply through the irrigation districts to fill that reservoir south of Barnwell. Related to that, you brought up the matter of putting fish in there. And so that concept, I'm still working on that concept with Tabor Irrigation District, the Alberta Conservation Association, and potentially one other partner. What they've indicated is that the Barnwell water reservoir would have to be dropped probably about another 15 to 20 feet in one particular location in order for there to be overwintering habitat there for fish. So preliminarily, we've looked into that, and if that dirt can be removed easily to make a bit more of a deeper portion of that old Barnwell raw water reservoir, even that comes at a price tag of about $1 million. So if we do go down the road of turning that into a fish, a fishery, with the added benefit of TID having some off-peak storage and some water treatment, that is still a completely viable opportunity to do that. Just that our raw water supply would be out in Chin, and the facility south of Barnwell, which was haven't used it since the year 2000, raw water storage, they still both could take effect. They still both could materialize, but they would just simply be different projects.
All right, thank you. Councillor Strauss?
Just a follow-up question, and I'm not sure if Mr. Armfeld or Gary or Andrew, there is no mention of our existing trout pond And about the amount of water that's kept in there at this present, do we know how much water is in our existing trout pond for our backup source?
That is quantifiable, but that comes under a different license than the license that we are utilizing to service the town with domestic raw water.
That's correct, Mr. Arnold. Our approval says we were to get it from CHIN or TID Irrigation Works. So we'd have to ask Alberta Environment for an option on the approval.
To use the water that out of the trout pond.
Yes.
Okay, but it would still be nice to know, the storage capabilities that's available there.
One other thing, when you discuss when in drought season, these pumps are going to be below the outlet structure at CHIN. So therefore, they're always going to be in water.
No, I know you made mention
Can
of
I
that.
add to
Yes.
that, Gary?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, guys. If you want to flip back to the slide that shows the graph of all the different colored lines, just to give you some context, so the elevation of the proposed intake would be at about 846 meters. You can see that's below that graph even. So the lowest point on that graph is over 848. So our proposed intake would be at 846. So we would be well below where any historical water levels, even the lowest of the low, have been since 1994 anyways, just to provide some context.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How easy is it to service this pipe we put out into CHIN? Because to me that seems like the way to go is just that way instead of the reservoir at Barnwell we can work on later on for fisheries or extra storage. But no matter what, we still have to do the pump, right? And how do we service the intake on that pump?
Andrew, you want to?
You want me to answer that one, Gary?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So on the intake itself, there would be a intake screen, which would have a backwashing capability. You can see it in the one photo. I don't know if you want to flip to that slide, but essentially there would be a screen there which would have a back pulse. Basically, there'd be an air line running out to it from a compressor located in the control building, which would keep that clean. As well, the pump itself would be able to be pulled from the pump station location. That's those lines that extended kind of off the page on that section view drawing. So essentially, you'd hook a truck up to that, and you could physically pull the drop pipe and the pump out of the intake line itself. So again, that's the same exact setup that we did on the Cowley intake, which was a similar sort of design criteria that we had to address. That's worked well there. So there is that capability of physically pulling the pump, and there is the ability to backwash and keep the screen itself clean on the intake.
If I'm correct, I believe that was the trouble with our previous intakes. They silted over and we couldn't service them. So this one is serviceable.
Your existing intake has no such backwash capability. It's just a pipe out into CHIN, about 60 meters out from shore.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Scheer, I believe. I can fully understand the desire and the requirement for the additional 340 feet of intake pipe to get to a lower level to draw water from. But are you telling us that the pump station and the pumps therein are at the end of their life cycle, or just a requirement for the new intake that we need submersible pumps?
We're just looking at ensuring we have a good, reliable raw water source for 25 years. Okay, we cannot guarantee that at the CHIN pump station right now. So for everybody to feel good about your supply, this is the only viable option that we found.
What if in the future they decide to expand CHIN Reservoir? How will that affect our pump station?
It shouldn't affect it at all because these pumps are way out into the middle of the lake. Basically, they're just raising the elevation is all they're doing. So this wouldn't affect it at all.
Okay, so the pump itself is sitting in the lake, or is it's in a pump shack, I believe, right?
No, the pump would actually be in the pipeline. So if we go to
Yeah.
the next drawing, right, this goes down in, those pumps actually go down into the intake and then push the water up. So in summertime, you know, where we're not using, we can pull them out, service them, and then, you know, backwash it before it, so it's all ready to go. This would not be anywhere near where the water surface, where the water line would be.
Okay, so if they raised it 20 feet or something, we'd be underwater though. with
Yes,
our-
well, not here. No, that's right, Andrew? This would be higher.
This would be higher, and we have that capability of setting that pump station elevation, whatever we
Yeah.
need it to be, right? Because that's just a building and a concrete box with valving in it to pull the pumps out. That could be set wherever we need to based on, you know, future FSL elevation of the reservoir.
And we currently,
Okay, and
so we currently have the stormwater management plan for Southern Alberta, which called for that additional storage. We would ensure that, you know, a 1 in 200 year storm would not flood this building.
All right. Councillor Towns?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I looked at both these proposals quite intensively, and I do not like the thought of doing expanding the Barnwell Reservoir. Simply because even if you do it and dig it down and line it, you're still going to have a clay base.
sorry, we can't hear Louis.
Is the microphone?
There's a mic over by council.
Even if you expand that Barnwell Reservoir, we're still going to have a clay base. And you dig them down, and when you build reservoirs and line them, you still want to have a clay base. I think anytime you can take and bring water into the town in a pipeline, you are way more efficient, and you have way better control of how you can bring your water in, how you can pre-filter your water, so your water treatment plant's going to be doing a whole lot less work than if we try to bring it into more basins and everything else. I think the only option is to actually pump it from Chin.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bruin, you got a question? Councillor Bruin?
I agree with what Councillor Tam says there. I think no matter what, we have to do these pumps, and it's right now it's a good option to go with if it's viable, and we can use the Barnwell Reservoir in the future with the fisheries and however that may work.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? All right, someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Garner.
I'm prepared to make a motion that council accepts the raw water supply report for information purposes.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Carried now. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Shearer.
Yeah,
And Andrew, thank you.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry, there
There's
is.
an extension to the motion.
If council
All right.
chooses to do so, it's up to you. Right.
Okay. That's correct. All right, is somebody prepared to make that second motion? Councillor Garner.
Fill in the rest, and directs administration to add the new intake and pump station at Chin Reservoir to the 2024 capital budget and to apply for grant funding for this project.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Councillor Strauss.
Your worship, I kind of wish that we would have some more information before we proceeded with this motion, because it would be nice to have a little more information before we proceed with this. This is I think this requires a little more thought and a little more time to review all the facts and procedures here. Just making this kind of a decision with this much information on a short-term basis, I think we need to sit back and postpone this for a short term and review some more figures on this.
What are you suggesting as a short term?
I don't know, a month perhaps?
Well, we're only accepting it as information, so it's still open, is it not?
Well, actually, no, the second portion of that motion is a direction based.
Sorry.
Mr. Shearer. Sorry, Mr.
Let's not
Councillor.
forget, whenever we have capital budgets, they come for council approval year by year. Okay? Anytime we apply for grant funding, council is aware of that, does not mean we're going to get that grant funding. And that could take 2-3 year process. We've seen that.
Correct. All right. Councillor Beckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand, I appreciate Councilor Strovo's concern. However, like Mr. Shear just said, it'll be discussed again in budget discussions 2020 for 21, 22, 23, 24. So I think we can address it at that time. because, we're 3.5 years away, right? However, if Councilor Strovos wants to do it this way, use the power of the tabling motion, sir, and you're able to do it.
I just expressed my concerns against it, and I'll just vote against it. I just don't think we have enough information.
All right, fair enough. Councillor Garner, do you have another comment on that? All right. There's a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
In favor.
In favor.
Opposed? All right, carried. Thank you. All right, on to item 6.2, curling rink roof. Thank you, Andrew, also for your input and your information. If you're still on the line.
Take care.
Thank you.
Just proceed, Ms. Phillips. You're already there on the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. The curling rink roof repairs were cut from the 2020 capital budget, and our building maintenance department recently engaged Swan Roofing Consultants to do a roof evaluation of the of the curling rink roof. It was found that the roof is in poor condition with a life expectancy of 0 to 1 years. Our building maintenance department also worked with some contractors to get some alternative solutions to do the roof repairs or roof replacement, and found that the project could be completed for $215,000. We had already requested that we carry forward $117,080 from the Community Centre Exterior Upgrades Project, so we have that funding in place in the capital budget to be used towards the curling rink roof. And we are requesting an additional $97,920 to be allocated to this project to create a budget of $215,000 so that this project can be completed this year. Our concern is if we do leave the project not attended, that we will end up with further damages from leaving it. So.
Great, thank you. Mr. Aurora, do you have something to add to that?
Not really.
Okay, thank you. Any questions arising? All right.
I have a question.
Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, what is wrong with the roof? Like, what needs to be fixed on it? It has to be all resurfaced, or what are we getting for this $215,000?
I'm just going to get Mr. Scher to respond to the
So
technical.
currently you're looking at a complete replacement because the tar is actually so warped. Well, we've got to keep distance.
You can even use this microphone.
Sorry. So what we're
I can't hear Gary.
Yeah. So what we'd be looking at is complete replacement because the tar and gravel is just so thin. It's actually getting down to the fiber layers down below. So when it rains or the snow melt, it's actually mushy underneath when the staff are standing on it. So therefore, the water is penetrating in layers below. The main area of concern, like you pointed out in the report, is around the HVAC unit where it's completely gone. So once the evaluation was done, it was recommended for a complete replacement.
All right, thank you. Councillor Strellis.
Just a question to Mr. Scheer. Did I gather in reading this here that they're going to remove the existing tar and gravel?
That's correct, and the fiber underneath, yes.
Okay. I replaced a roof here in the last couple of years, and the consultant said it was best to leave that in place, and then you put your foam insulation over top that, then put your fiber down, and then some product on top to hold it down, and then you get additional R factor and stability.
Well, the last thing we'd like to do is leave that water in place. If it is getting in there, we really don't want to cause that water trap that water between two sets of layers. So then we're causing mold and mildew. So we want to replace that and ensure that the water does not penetrate any other layers below it. Here, if we add on, we're actually going to get for anywhere from 4. I think we're going to specify 4 to 8 inches of insulation, which there is no currently insulation there at all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? Councillor Bruin?
Mr. Mayor? What other options do we have besides the tar, this other product that's around town? Is that viable for something like this?
Yes, it is. There's PVC, there's torched on. So that's going to be in the RFP now, if council accepts this, that we would ask for suppliers to bring us whatever they're currently using for roofing.
So we're not committed to tar?
No, we're not committed to tar.
That new design for covering roofs. I'm not sure what they call it, but that seems to be very good.
Yeah, we've used PVC in a number of places, and it's been very viable for us.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that council include the curling rink roof replacement at a cost of $215,000 in the 2020 capital budget, with $117,080 from the carried forward budget for the community center exterior upgrade, and the remaining $97,920 to be funded from the capital reserves.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? Councillor Brown?
Or do we need a motion for an RFD to go out for quotes on this?
No, that wasn't suggested.
I thought that's what Gary was mentioning there.
So when council approves this in the capital budget, then that would go out for an RFD. That's what you're telling us.
We don't need the motion.
No, thank you.
So, okay, so just to be clear, you don't need a motion on this whatsoever.
No, we need a motion.
We need that motion.
Just that motion.
The RFD is automatic.
I see. Okay, I'm with you. All right. Okay, fair enough. We're all on the same page then. Okay. Once again, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
Oh, carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, on to item 6.3, mutual aid fire control agreement. Mr. Orwa.
Well, I'll just call upon the chief. Is already on the stage to address this with council. Yeah. Proceed.
All right, thank you, Chief Munshaw.
Thank you, Worship Council. So in front of you today is the Fire Mutual Aid Agreement, a mutual aid agreement that we've been in partnership since 2015. This agreement has passed forward through the Municipal Emergency Management Committee. This partnership has not been reciprocated by the fire department or the town to the agriculture and forestry as of yet, but we have gained a lot of support from education and training needs with them. So it's identified as an agreement and a control plan. What's different about this is the fire agreement is now a no date closing agreement, but it has out clauses for both parties. But the fire control plan is based on a 3-year annual term, which we can identify either fee agreements or needs or changes to personnel and phone numbers that is re-identified. So today we're looking forward to Council's approach to signing off on the agreement and also having CAO sign off on his portion of the plan.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising?
I have a question.
Councillor Brown.
Has Ken signed on to this, Chief?
I can't confirm. The last time I had a conversation with Chief Schaefer, he had the Ag and Forestry going to meet him the very next day. Their intent was to sign, but I cannot confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Brown.
I'm prepared to make the motion that
All right.
Council supports Council in signing the mutual aid fire agreement, that Council supports CAO signing the mutual aid fire control plan subsequent to Council passing a motion in support for the mutual aid fire control agreement.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. On to item 6.4, password management policy. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, so Al is already there to address these 2 new policies that are in line with the 911 requirements. So proceed, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The new or latest standards for 911 require some new policies. Today I'm presenting 2 of these new policies. First one is password management policy. We have been following this policy for years. We never had it written down before, but our servers, our domain controller have been enforcing this kind of policy. I attached the policy and the procedure for you, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion. Councillor Garner.
I'm prepared to make a motion at this time, Mayor, that Council approves password management policy CS-IT-7 as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
Carried unanimously. Good. Thank you, Al. On to item 6.5, IT physical security policy. Mr. Orwa.
Well, Al is still on the hot seat. Just proceed, Al.
Another
right,
policy
thank you, Al.
required. Thank you, sir. Another policy required by the new standard from 911, and again, we have been following this policy for years. We just never had it written down, so we developed it and presented it to Council for approval.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Garner.
That, I'd like to make a motion that council approves the IT physical security policy CS-IT-8 as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I'm sorry, we didn't hear Mr.
Councillor Bruin, sorry, was that?
We could not hear Mr. Garner's.
All right, he's just coming to the mic here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
The motion that I made was the council approves the IT physical security policy CS-IT-8 as presented.
All right, once again, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Carried now. It's good. Thank you. Item 6.5, IT physical security. That's the one we just done. Sorry, yes, we did. Okay. Oh, 6.6, Taber Municipal Police Commission report. Mr. Orwa.
Yes, I'll call upon Mr. Armfeld if he's on the line to see if he has any report.
Mr. Armfeld?
Yeah, as the Secretary of the Police Commission, you have the report in front of you from the Police Commission. If there's any questions, please direct them to me, and I'll filter them back to Chief Abella to get you any responses you're needing.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion. Councillor Tams.
Mike. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that council accepts the Taber Municipal Police Commission report for information.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.7, department reports. I'll go through these individually. If anybody's got a question, please stop me accordingly. First off, fire department report. Water and wastewater treatment report.
Question there, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tams.
Question for Gary. In your report, you're talking about replacing the pumps at the chimney.
Councillor Tams, could you just use the mic there, please?
In your report, you're talking about replacing the pumps at the Chin pump station and at the water treatment plant. Are these one and the same or two different pumps?
No, they're one and the same. But if we did replace them, well, we are going to replace one because we need a backup in the meantime. So then that pump would be moved to the water treatment plant and used as that alternate high-level pump.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Engineering and Public Works report. Recreation Department report. Councillor Stravas?
Yes, I have a question here. It says applied for and was awarded an Alberta recycling grant of $30,000 to build a 3-cell tire recycling area at the transfer station. Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
So we applied for this about 2 years ago, and the grant, we got a letter saying, yes, thank you for your grant, and we approve your grant. So what we're going to do, we'll build a 3-cell storage facility for the tires, and basically they're going to pay us for storage, and we get money back from the amount of tires that they're taking out of it. So $30,000 will build it, so there's no cost to the town, and we'll get money in return where the tires are taken out.
Councillor Stravas?
Just a follow-up question. So then are these tires put in intact, or are they chewed up, or
Either or. It's just tires that from tire shops or people bring down old tires.
Okay, so they're not being recycled or anything?
Well, they will be recycled through the Recycling Council of Alberta.
Okay,
That's
so
what
this
we
is just a storage facility
This
then?
is just a storage, yes.
Okay, all right. Thanks for
Yep.
clarifying.
A question on that. What about fire retardant and that for storing tires?
That is all covered through that process. Yes, I realize there could be a problem with rubber burning, but we take every precaution to ensure that no flammable materials are in the area.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Recreation Department reports. Plan and Economic Development reports. Human Resource Activity reports. Administrative Services reports. Finance Activity report. And CAO Activity reports. Seeing no other questions, I'd ask for a motion, please. Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that council accepts the department reports for information.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor?
In favor.
Favor.
Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.8, standing item, council requests. Mr. Orwa.
So again, this is the opportunity council has to ask administration any question or provide some direction in form of a motion.
Right, thank you.
Now, so far, just to look through, we only have 3 standing items. And of course, the first and second one are ongoing. That's the trip to Japan. And then the last one that was raised by Councillor Fath, I think so far a letter has been sent to the police commission. So those are the only 3 outstanding items.
All right, thank you. Any new standing item suggestions there by any council member? Seeing none, all right. Councillor Brown, sorry.
Make sure people self-isolate. That's the only thing I have to say.
All right, thank you. With that, we don't need a motion on that. We're on to item 6.9, Mayor and Council reports. Let's go with on the line first, Councillor Firth. Councillor Firth.
Report.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bruin.
I have nothing to report today.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Nothing specific.
Thank you, Councillor Tams.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Beckering.
Ditto, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stravas.
Your Worship, on the weekend, I had the opportunity to attend the Lions Club 85th anniversary, and Mr. Joe Orban has a detailed documentation of what the Lions Club has done for this community over the last 85 years, and there's some really interesting statistics there. It would be nice to have Mr. Orban come and repeat all that to council, so that council is aware of how much that individual one club has done for this community over the years. It's really quite phenomenal, and the amount of time and effort they put into that. So I would think that council should take it under advisement and invite him and just to hear all of that, because it's really quite remarkable.
Thank you, Councillor Stravas. We could certainly add that on the agenda item, invite Mr. Orban at some time in the future when other things settle down, ideally. For myself, I also attended on the Lions 85th anniversary, a very nice event, very well done, as well as the grand opening of the KFC, again in Tabor here this last Wednesday, that there were several of us there as well, representing the council, Tabor Town Council and the MD at Tabor as well. So that's, business is booming there. That's nice to see with their drive-through and takeout. Other than that, I have nothing further to report. Ask for someone to make a motion. Councillor Tams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that council accepts the mayor and councilor reports for information.
Motion on the table. All in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Carried now. So thank you. On to delegations. We have no delegations. The media is not present today.
They've just sent a note that there are no inquiries at this point.
All right. That will work just fine. Thank you. And item number 9, closed session. Ask for a motion to move into closed session. Councillor
Make a motion that council moves into closed session.
All right. Thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor?
In favor.
Carried now. So thank you. And we'll just take a 5-minute break here, please.